Alex Hormozi has generated over $200 million online, publishes over 36,000 pieces of content every year, and has battle-tested every content strategy on every platform. But he hasn't missed a single podcast upload in over 7 years, while over 90% of all podcasts are abandoned before reaching their 4th episode. Which raises an important question. What does Alex know about podcasting that most people clearly don't? Well, to save you hours of sifting through his sea of content to find out, I'm going to break down the exact role podcasting plays in his overall business and the principles of his strategy me and my business partner Anthony have used to help over 300 plus business owners attract dream clients without needing social media and even generate over $100,000 from our own podcast last year. Now, to understand Hormozi's podcasting strategy, we first need to understand the role of long-form content in his broader business context, especially when compared to other types of content.
I don't think there's anything wrong with shorts. We make tons of shorts. But I see the purpose of shorts as many times a way to get someone to watch along, right? They watch a couple shorts and then think, okay, this guy seems legit or this gal seems legit. I'm gonna risk my time, because that's the risk. They're making an investment, right? You're making an investment today. I'm gonna risk that I'm gonna get a good return on this, right? And so shorts then lead to longs. But let me show you the difference from an influence perspective. How many reinforcing cycles do you think you can have in 30 seconds compared to 2 hours? It's like not even close. And so if someone watched 2 1-hour pieces of content from me, period, okay, 2 1-hour pieces, it's 120 minutes. For me to get that same level of exposure and kind of cycles of reinforcement with a prospect, and they were only consuming shorts, right? Let's say my average short, let's say it's 15 seconds. So that means it's 4 shorts per minute. So if I have 120 minutes for longs, someone would have to watch 480 shorts to have the same level of exposure as watching 2 hours with me. And think about how important this is. What were the things that people said, like this was the quote podcast election? Trump went on, and I don't care about the politics behind it, but I do care about influence and persuasion.
So the principle here is that long-form content is absolutely crucial for building a deeper relationship with prospects online. And without it, you're simply stuck relying on your 20-second clip here, a 200-word LinkedIn post there, to build absolutely mountains of trust. And while he referenced how he uses it and how the American president, perhaps the most famous person in the world, uses it, this principle doesn't just work for the biggest names in business or even the world. It works exactly the same for much smaller business owners and experts. Like you can see here, for example, with prospects reaching out of their own accord with the like, know, and trust elements already in place, completely ready to buy. Now, when Hormozi speaks about his long-form content, he sometimes uses YouTube and podcasts kind of interchangeably to the point where you might even think, well, should I start a YouTube channel or should I start a podcast? Which one do I need? But when we dive deeper into a strategy, it becomes shockingly clear why video alone doesn't make the cut whatsoever.
So the depth on podcasts, dude, check this out. 20 minutes is the average for us in terms of listen duration for people on podcasts. I mean, it blows everything out of the water. I mean, the closest is YouTube at 8.5. The amount of people that trust the person that they listen to podcast is through the roof. All right, so when you make a recommendation, the percentage likely that your audience that listens converts is very high.
So it's pretty clear that a podcast builds the kind of depth that YouTube just can't even touch. And that's even for Alex Hormozi, one of the world's most prolific creators. His YouTube videos still don't average over 10 minutes of watch time compared to his podcasts, which are more than double that. That means podcasting is the most leveraged place to build depth of trust with prospects because every piece of content you put out goes so much further than every other platform. And no, I'm not biased in any way, shape, or form. But having worked with hundreds of business owners who have both audio podcasts and YouTube channels, it's very obvious why there's a massive gap between the two platforms. When someone's watching YouTube, their brain is constantly weighing up if there's something more interesting or more rewarding, you could say, something that's going to grab their dopamine. There's only ever one click away, and that happens because when you're watching a YouTube video, there's also 5 other videos jumping out at you on the sidebar. And don't even get me started on the comment section. I mean, I always binge the comments. In fact, I press play on a video and go straight to the comments while it's playing. And this is because of a psychological principle called the opportunity cost of attention, which basically means that when people can see other options, they become way more aware of what they might be missing when staying with the current thing. So even if the video is good, the brain, it kind of feels the cost of continuing. You know, if I keep watching this, I might be missing a better video. So you end up losing viewers a couple minutes in because most of the time they just jump ship to watch a different video that seems better or more exciting in that moment. Now, on the other hand, podcasts don't trigger this at all because the listener can't see other options. They're walking, driving, cooking, cleaning, working out, whatever it might be. There's no other content vying for their attention. And this is very, very unique to podcasting, where when they're consuming the content, they're fully committed to the episode and are very present with the host they're listening to. And we saw Alex Hormozi use this massive advantage in real time back when me and Anthony worked as senior coaches inside Hormozi's biggest portfolio company at the time. And it was a 9-figure company, hugely recognized, like absolutely killing it. They were growing at astronomical speeds. And still they started a podcast. Yes, a podcast. And no, I'm not biased. Not a YouTube channel, not a TikTok account, an audio podcast on Apple and Spotify only. Now, you might not have a company doing millions a month or a massive team. In fact, if you're anything like me and Anthony, you probably have no intentions of scaling to millions a month and instead actually enjoy keeping a lean team and working very, very closely with your clients. Which then begs the question, well, if you're a business owner that gets clients great results but doesn't have a well-known brand online yet, how does a podcast improve your conversions?
This is so important. People usually only listen to 3 to 5 podcasts. And so think about your Instagram, for example. If you look at the number of people you follow, you might follow 500, you might follow 1,000, you might follow 3,000 people on your Instagram. And so all 3,000 of those accounts are competing for your scroll every time you log in. But if you get on someone's listener followership, earballs, you are only competing against 3 or 4 other people. And so as long as you continue to consistently deliver, you will basically be able to keep that person over the long haul. So when you make a recommendation, the percentage likely that your audience that listens converts is very high.
When Alex Hormozi mentions these recommendations that podcast hosts make, for famous shows, those might be like sponsored products or ads. But for Hormozi, his podcast serves to make recommendations directly towards his business and working with him. And if you're a business owner or expert, this is honestly great news because it paves a very, very clear path of conversion where a listener finds your podcast, listens to you, builds trust with you, sees you as the expert, you recommend working with you or joining your program, buying your service, whatever it might be. You're the only choice in your mind. And like Hormozi said, they really trust you. And that recommendation goes a long way to the point where listeners reaching out to work with you is the standard. It's simply the way the funnel is set up. And as he also said, podcast listeners only have a few shows in their rotation, but the shows they do listen to mean the world compared to the other creators they follow elsewhere, like on Instagram, for example. Now, putting this very practically, it means that turning your audience into clients is way easier than these other platforms because you need less of your audience to make a sale. Honestly, it's kind of funny saying this now because back in our early days, when me and Anthony started helping experts grow their business through podcasting, we didn't see this opportunity that clearly. We were very foggy, you could say. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further. We were basically walking around blindfolded by the propaganda that you have to have a huge audience to make sales, even though you're a business owner selling your own knowledge or service. For example, we'd been told that on YouTube, you should expect to book a sales call every 2,000 views per video, which was one reference point. And then one of our clients, Sheridan, closed 2 $6,000 clients in a month when her audio podcast was averaging less than 100 listens per episode. This is why Hormozi has continued to host his podcast for years, despite having so many other marketing channels and arms to his business. But there's just one problem with this, right? If you're not currently one of the 3 to 5 podcasts that your prospect is listening to on a rotation on a weekly basis, well, how do you break into such an exclusive selection if you've not already had a podcast or a big following for years?
To be a top 1% podcaster, you have to upload 21 podcasts. 21, top 1%. 90% of people don't get past 1. 9% don't get past 20. And then 1% of podcasters, of all of them, make it to 21 plus. The world belongs to those who can keep doing without seeing the result of what they're doing. And the longer you can wait to see the result of your doing while still continuing to do is the extent to which you can win big in life.
Everyone thinks everyone has a podcast, but no one knows that over 90% of the podcasts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, if I can say podcast in the same sentence anymore, are publishing new podcast episodes. And when you look at the numbers, the opportunity becomes very, very clear. While the number of podcast listeners has been increasing every single year, the number of podcasts releasing new episodes has actually been decreasing every year as well. Now, I'm not a data scientist, I'm not in the economic space, but I think there's a pretty big opportunity here for the right business owners to quickly become industry leaders because the competition is clearly low with high demand. But despite the low competition, after speaking to thousands of podcasters, we've seen that the majority make great content for years, but still somehow never break into someone's top 3 to 5 shows, their weekly listening rotation. And without doing that, then clearly you'll never become an industry leader. And it's because they're missing this vital part of Hormozi's strategy.
If you sell services to anyone, you're likely going to be an educator, not an entertainer. Meaning you're trying to provide value to people to change their behavior in some way, and ideally changing the behavior that gets them to walk closer to you and buy stuff. If you want to attract the right avatar, make content for that avatar. That sounds so obvious and simple, and the thing is that no one does it, because here's the writer downer. The content is the targeting. The algorithm is so good now, it knows what you're talking about, it judges who you are, and will display it to the people that they know have a history of content that is similar to that people find valuable. And so if you're making stuff about how to fix pianos, because you're a piano repair guy, then you will find people who are trying to fix their pianos. But if you're making that type of content, you might be like, man, I'm only getting 1,000 views. It's like, yeah, but the market of people who are buying pianos might be significantly smaller than the market of people who just want to be entertained or distracted. If I were to think to myself, like, I have a room of 1,000 people and all of them are only interested in fixing pianos, that's a hell of an opportunity.
Now, this exposes a massive hole that most business owners have. When they launch their shows, they go for the typical mass appeal interviews with guests talking about anything and everything, a huge wide range of topics, which makes it impossible to grow because it's not clear who the show is for. Now, on the other hand, when you're a celebrity, you can get away with this because you're already known with a big audience. Your name and your face and your recognition precedes you, and people will give you the time of day to talk about whatever. But if people don't already know you, you just won't break into anyone's 3 to 5 shows on rotation with a podcast that looks like everything else. So let's bring it back to the number of active podcasts right now. The majority of these shows are actually just generic shows interviewing people from anything from like politics to peptides. And like Hormozi said, if you want to attract the right avatar, make content for that avatar. There are, of course, a minority who are doing this. And yes, obviously they're my clients and they're killing it. Like Sheridan. The reason Sheridan was able to build such deep trust, make it to people's weekly listen, and even turn those listeners into clients quickly was because she wasn't competing with all the other broad shows in the business space. She was one of, if not the only podcast for female entrepreneurs struggling with burnout from a dysregulated nervous system. Now you might be thinking, but I'm not in the business space and I don't know anything about the nervous system. That's okay, we've seen this work many, many times in different niches. Like, I don't know if I can quite top fixing pianos, but here are some of my most favorite random niches that have absolutely killed it following this advice. So you got Martin here, who helps actors get their acting career off the ground, who now has an audience of thousands and made $30,000 in a single month selling his coaching program. Or Megan, who helped elopement photographers, yes, elopement photographers, make 6 figures a year without social media. And they're now making a killing because their podcast is reaching the right people and nurturing those listeners and then turning them into clients. Or Todd, who now completely owns the niche for highly sensitive people, which I didn't know was a thing either. And he's a very needed expert and consultant with a very needed podcast that focuses on that topic. So like you can see, the principles we shared with you are the same ones that we help our clients apply in order to grow podcasts that position them as an industry leader, build a wildly engaged audience, and attract dream clients into their business. These are just some of the things you need to have in place in order to have a successful show. Now, you might be thinking about launching your own podcast. I mean, perhaps you already have one and you're trying to get the most out of it. But either way, there are other foundational components that are honestly key to how you set up your podcast in order to have this kind of success with these strategies. And that's exactly what we reveal in this video right here. Maybe it's here, I don't know, somewhere on the screen.